Hi there, everyone. Christian Barker here, and yeah, thanks for joining me from wherever in the world you may be, whatever time of day it may be, and however you're feeling, whether you're at home or have been allowed out. Today, I am lucky enough to be having a chat with a very interesting gentleman named of Jack Carlson. Now, Jack is the founder of a I guess fashion, classic style, preppy influenced clothing label named Rowing Blazers, which really sort of started out from Jack's personal interest. He was a very highly skilled rower, rowed for his universities and for high school, prep school, represented the United States, I believe, 3 times in the national team. Yeah, during his studies at university, where he was getting a doctorate, I believe it was in the United Kingdom in archaeology, he started looking into the history of the rowing blazer. Jack has just joined us. I'm going to let him in right now to the conversation, and he can tell you a little bit more. Hi there, Jack. How you doing?
Hey, Christian, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm sorry if you caught me there. I was kind of rambling on a little bit about your background and your personal history. So yeah, look, without further ado, perhaps we could, in a nutshell, in 140 characters or less, kind of sum up your background and how you came to be running this very hotly tipped label called Rowing Blazers.
Yeah, it's been a strange journey. I didn't catch too much of what you were saying, but my background is not in fashion.
Mm.
It's in sport and in academia, really.
Yeah.
Um, the journey kind of began with writing a book called Rowing Blazers, which came out, uh, I guess, 6 years ago now, which is strange to think about, or 5.5 years ago.
Okay.
The book is about all the traditions related to the sport of, well, related to the blazer in the sport of rowing.
Mm.
A lot of people don't realize the blazer originated in the sport of rowing. You and I
Yeah.
had a chat about that about 14
Yeah.
months ago
Yeah.
for a
Absolutely.
piece that you wrote for the Rake. But um, the book was sort of intended in my mind to really be for the rowing community, but it ended up kind of taking off in the menswear and sort of fashion communities, and
Mm.
was picked up by Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren hosted a bunch of events for the book, and that's sort of where I took my first steps into sort of the business, going from just from writing about blazers in kind of an academic way to having my first taste of sort of the industry, and it sort of planted the seeds of the idea of starting my own brand.
So how did that transition take place? Because I imagine, given the amount of time that you put into studying to become an archaeologist, that I guess would have been your ultimate career goal, and then writing this book, and then somehow within the space of just a few years that turned into this thriving clothing label.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really mapped out, and it wasn't as if I had really sort of well mapped out plans before going down this path. You know,
Yeah.
I have been working on a PhD, or a DPhil as they call it in Oxford, for several years. Probably took me a little bit longer than it should have, but part of that was because I was spending every summer back in the U.S., rowing,
Yeah.
and training, sometimes competing with the national team. Um, After I finished my DPhil, I moved back to the U.S. and I became a teacher at a boarding school
Hmm.
in Massachusetts, a place called St. Mark's. I was teaching archaeology and classics, and I was coaching the rowing team.
Yeah.
Um, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. During the spring break, I went down to New York and started having a few meetings with people about this idea of starting a brand. So it had been starting to percolate while I was a teacher, really.
Mm.
And I had intended basically the summer after that first year of teaching to just really throw myself into this project and try to figure out how to start a brand, really. What ended up happening was in May of that year, end of May, the lightweight national team coach actually reached out to me. I was retired from kind of elite rowing at that
Okay.
point. But the lightweight national team coach reached out and said, "Hey, we'd actually like you to come back onto the team and to compete at the World Championships this summer." This was in
Yep.
May. The World Championships, so the end of August to beginning of September. And I have been really enjoying my retirement to the full. As you can imagine, being a teacher at a boarding school, there's always something to eat. I was, when I was on the team, when I was competing, I'm a lot taller than most coxes are. The cox is the guy who steers the boat, makes the calls. So I really sort of had to starve myself when I was competing, and I was really enjoying not having to do that. So when this lightweight national team coach rang me up, I said, well, I'm really quite far over, the kind of required weight. And he
Yep.
said, no, I've heard that actually. I guess word had
That's
gotten
nice.
around, but he said, can you get down by the World Championships? Gave me about 3 months. And I said, yeah, not knowing if it was possible. I agreed to do it. And the next 3 months was like it was like you can imagine a montage of just running, cycling, rowing, and not eating anything. It kind of sidetracked me from my plans to really throw myself into starting the brand that summer. But what I did instead, I just kind of started it as really a side project and worked on it for, I don't know, about 60 minutes a day. And I just worked that way for about a year and a half until, while I was still training, while I was on the national team, until I moved to New York.
Something that fascinates me, and your what Rowing Blazers does is sort of loosely and generally described most frequently in the media as preppy style. But what really fascinates me about preppy style is that it can be approached in so many different ways, and I think what your label does is really demonstrate that. Is that you can put a punk twist on it, you can put a hip hop twist on it, you can put a 1970s sleaze twist on it, you can put the kind of Caddyshack vibe on it. There's so many different sort of angles that you can approach it from. What would you say is your sort of if you acquiesce to being described as being preppy style, what would you say is your unique approach to it?
Preppy is such a complicated, loaded term. I mean, especially here in the US, it's a really loaded term, and it can have some quite negative connotations going along with it. So it's interesting. I don't know quite how to answer the question, but what I can say is, at the outset, I really wanted to avoid people describing the brand as preppy. Of course, first thing when the brand came out, the first piece of press we had was this big article saying, "This is the ultimate preppy brand." So, you can't control it too much. But when some people think of preppy, they'll think of Ralph Lauren. When some people think of it, they'll think of Vineyard Vines. Some people will think of J Press. Some people will think of like a brand like Southern Tide or something. It's all over the map what people kind of think of. I definitely think clearly there are strong sort of preppy influences in the brand. I do try to avoid these labels as much as possible, though. I mean,
Sure.
and I try to avoid sort of the negative connotations. I try to keep the good and leave the bad, if that kind of makes sense, because I think there's clearly a lot of good stuff that comes out of that world. I mean, the sense of color, many of the categories, whether it's blazers or rugby shirts or polo shirts, these things are now staples of everybody's wardrobe, no matter what your sort of personal sense of style is. And I do think as well, there's a sense of kind of rebelliousness or tongue in cheek about, sort of at least what I think of as preppy style. I think some of that gets lost because brands like Vineyard Vines, brands that are a little more mass but sort of play on this sort of preppy idea. I don't know. I think they sort of lose that. Anything that's going to be a sort of mass marketed brand, it's very hard to sort of have, I don't know, to have that sort of tongue in cheek sensibility. I think that another part of it is, of course, Ralph Lauren has been so dominant in this space for so long, and I mean they do an amazing job. But I think one thing that's very different about Ralph Lauren, and as compared to us, is I think Ralph Lauren, they take themselves very seriously. Any ad campaign that Ralph Lauren does, it's beautiful. It's like art. It's they'll get the world's best models, the world's best photographers. Everybody will look just absolutely perfect. Everybody will look so beautiful. They'll be in this idealized world, whether it's in Greenwich or in Jamaica or in Aspen or in the American Southwest, and everything will look just so, or in some castle in England. I'd say that, for me, from my perspective, it's missing a little something. It's amazing. It's cool. It's beautiful. And he's built this incredible empire. I don't have, those same sort of aspirations, but what I do want to always have in everything we do is that sense of fun, that almost slightly subversive sensibility, which I think if you go back to the origins of preppy style or back to the origins of sort of Ivy style or whatever you want to call it, American collegiate style, that sense of being slightly subversive, being really tongue-in-cheek, being very playful with these things is an important part of that idea.
Well, what I find really interesting, it almost seems to me that there's a lot of those kind of preppy tropes or things that have become very quintessential preppy sort of style moves, which seem to be originally kind of thumbing your nose at a dress code somewhere, like, oh, okay, you have to wear, trousers. Well, I'm going to wear trousers that are patch madras or that are blazing red that have got little lobsters embroidered all over them or whatever, where, you technically could really get past any dress code in the world. You could go and have tea at the Ritz in London, which doesn't allow you to wear jeans with your blazer, but you could wear a complete patch madras suit, as I see you guys have recently unleashed.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, a lot of these things developed in student culture one way or another. I mean, the book Rowing Blazers, is in many ways, it's an exploration of some of the idiosyncrasies of student culture in the US, especially in the UK, especially in the Netherlands. But you're absolutely right. I mean, these things much more generally are the product of a sort of sense of subversiveness in student culture, where you're technically adhering to a dress code, but you're having as much fun as you possibly can while staying within those, quite broad parameters. I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Oh, it's the same thing as, Oxford bags, which apparently came from the students having to, still wanting to wear their +4s, but needing to wear trousers over the top. Or just last week, I was writing about the late great Peter Beard, and it was his I think great grandfather or something of that nature, Griswold Laureard, who cut the tails off a tailcoat and invented something, or one of the two origin stories of the tuxedo. So yeah, absolutely.
I love all those little stories, and so often they are young people doing that. I mean, I quite like the word collegiate to describe this sort of sense of style that we're talking about, because what is, what is collegiate if not the intersection of sort of youth and tradition?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I think of a lot of this stuff, or a lot of the things that fit into this sense of style.
Are you, finding yourself in the rag trade unexpectedly? And look, and congratulations that you're 3 years in now. I believe, I should point out that it's sort of this week, right? That you're celebrating your third birthday. So big congrats on that. That's amazing. But
It
yeah,
is a bit of a milestone, I'd say. Yeah, it's and it's in some ways it's really blown by.
but it's also, it's during a time of great challenges. Do you how are you facing the current situation that we're all going through? And I know, the garment trade has been particularly hard hit. People are just consuming less and less clothes. It's hard on the supply chain. You haven't got retail. It's hard to get, even to do e-commerce. So how are you facing the current challenges?
Yeah, it is. It's awful kind of what's been going on in the world for the past, few months, really. And I'd say business-wise, we are fortunate not to be in the same position as, a lot of these larger companies that, you see basically declaring bankruptcy. J. Crew the other day, Neiman Marcus, I think Brooks Brothers it's not quite declared bankruptcy, but is in fairly dire straits. We're fortunate not to be in a position where we have a huge amount of real estate, where we're really relying, even in normal times, on brick and mortar retail. We're not in a position where we have, masses and masses of inventory. So, we're fairly sort of fortunate. My first reaction when this, sort of pandemic started really, becoming an issue that everybody was talking about, and it became clear how, even then it was not quite clear what the scale of this was going to be, but it was clear that it was going to be pretty significant. My first reaction really was to see what we could do to help. And at the time, this was very beginning of March, I guess. Coronavirus had not hit the shores of the United States or the UK, actually, for that matter, in any kind of significant way. It was when we were really talking about this as something that was affecting China pretty badly, and starting to affect Italy in a pretty significant way. And at that time, actually, if you Googled coronavirus, how to help, or coronavirus charities, donation, not much actually came up at that time, which is kind of amazing to think about. So, but I did know that Save the Children, which is a charity that I have some good friends involved with, I volunteered for Save the Children in a very insignificant, minor way when I lived in England. A friend of mine actually ran a really cool secondhand shop in Primrose Hill. It's not like a normal secondhand shop. They would have all kinds of amazing things. Jude Law would swing by there and donate a whole bunch of amazing clothes. Yeah. And we would sell that and raise money actually for Save the Children. So, and I was aware that they were doing a lot in both China and Italy at that time. And so we just decided to donate a portion of our sales to Save the Children. We did that for a little while. When things started to really get bad here in the US, we were asked to join this sort of consortium called Brands for Better, which is mostly donating to an organization called Direct Relief. So we kind of pivoted to supporting that. It's because we are in a relatively fortunate position. I have to say, it's not great having our main store closed. We had 2 pop-ups running that we had to shut down, basically. but because we are relatively in a better position, I think, than a lot of people, you know, my sort of first reaction was like, well, what can we really do to kind of help with this crisis? The other thing more recently, and I wanted to do this from the get-go, but it's not so easy because we don't own our own factories. I mean, we work very closely with a number of factories, a number of workshops in the garment district, but we don't, you know, own them. But that's making masks. So in the past, I don't know, 4 weeks or so, we working with the people who do own those factories and making sure that we have the all clear from New York City, basically, to go in and do this. We've started making masks. So we're not able to make any blazers at the moment, but we're using that workshop in New York City where we would normally be making blazers to just make masks. I mean, it's a really skeleton operation because of, you know, out of concerns for people's health. You know, it's a very small number of people who are able to work in that space.
Absolutely,
But we're making masks as quickly as we can. We're donating them to the food bank in New York City. They are not medical masks. We're not set up to manufacture, you know, medical masks, but they are face masks that you know, we're able to donate to places like the food bank. And then we're making some of those available for sale as well. For every one that we sell, we're donating an additional mask to the food bank, in addition to the, you know, several thousand that we've donated anyway. And I've been amazed actually at how popular those masks have been. They're made using leftover scraps of fabric from blazers, from suits, from shirts, some great little pieces of fabric that we have left over from making blazers for different rowing clubs, things that we don't necessarily, you know, talk about on our social media, or things that you can't go on our website and shop for because they've just been made for a rowing club or a rugby club somewhere. But we have these leftover bits of fabric, as often happens, and they're really nice masks. But I never expected them to be as popular as they are.
Yeah, no, it's great work, and they're very cool, and I think you know, it's clear that that you guys are in it for the right reasons. But yeah, but the product is, you know, anything that you're putting on your face, you want to be a little bit of an expression of yourself, I would hope. If you're covering over the main other form of expressing yourself that you have. Something that's always struck me about what, you know, the garments that you make, and this is, I think, particularly noticeable in the rugbies, is that, you know, generally kind of heritage menswear or heritage style, classic style brands will either be very traditional American or traditional British, or, you know, in some cases traditional French or Italian or whatever it may be. You always seem to have quite a global outlook, and as an Australian myself, it's always sort of piquing my interest whenever I see the much more stylish than the official garb Aussie rugbies and stuff. So why did that come into it? You know, why do you have more of an international outlook than most brands would?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, I'm a fairly eclectic person. I think a lot of what we do at Rowing Blazers can kind of be traced back to, you know, I don't know, to my youth, I guess, in a way. You know, I grew up part of the time in the UK and part of the time in the US. I traveled a lot as a kid. My tastes were always quite eclectic. They were always, I don't know, very, very different from most of my classmates. I remember when I was in middle school and high school, I think, this is not an exaggeration, every single person in my class, in my year, wore Abercrombie and Fitch almost every single day and almost exclusively, like every article of clothing that they were wearing. I'm like proud to say I never owned a single thing from Abercrombie and Fitch, but I was, you know, I was always the guy that was a little bit different. And what would I be wearing instead? I might be wearing, I don't know. I might like something I'm wearing now. This is a vintage polo shirt from the Royal Hong Kong
Yeah.
Golf
Okay.
Club. It's not
Yeah.
called the Royal Hong Kong Golf Club anymore. I'm not a member of the Royal Hong Kong Golf Club actually, but someone who is gave this to me. It's just
Yeah.
a cool shirt. Or I might be wearing a rugby shirt that I picked up somewhere. I remember two rugby shirts that I bought when I was a little kid. They were absolutely massive on me. So as I grew, I was able to keep wearing them. But a rugby shirt that I bought in St. John's College in Cambridge, and I used to wear all the time. And a rugby shirt that I literally bought it in like a cathedral or something in Ireland. It was like a
Okay.
church rugby shirt. I used to wear these strange things all the time. Yeah, I think all those experiences as a kid inevitably kind of inform a lot of what I do, you know, with rowing blazers. It is very global. It is very eclectic, you know, and I think that's part of why, yes, it is preppy, but I sort of shy away from placing too many labels on it because it definitely draws on all sorts of influences.
Yeah. And you know, I guess a lot of that also comes down to garments like that. You know, you're never going to see someone else walking down the street wearing it, and which is a similar approach to what you take with rowing blazers. I often will look on the site and see something, and there's only, you know, extra large and extra small left, and you're clearly making things in very limited quantities, which is both, you know, creates garments that are more sought after and more unique, but what also, I suppose, in a situation like the world is facing now, has proven to be kind of a savvy approach as well, where, as you say, you're not stuck with truckloads of merch.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to the kind of scarcity aspect a little bit. You know, some of it is you know, is intentional, and some of
Mm.
it's not. You know, I mean, uh, we don't have people in the company who are like experienced planners or merchandisers. Um, because I mean, we've been around for 3 years, which in some ways actually sounds like a long time. But in many ways, we are still, you know, in our infancy, and we're growing very, you know, we're still on the steep part of the curve, I guess you could say. We're growing
Mm.
very quickly all the time. So it is very hard to make accurate projections and
Sure.
predictions. Um, yeah, I mean, definitely there are some things where, you know, the plan is like, okay, well, we want to make, you know, we want to make enough of this that the people who are like really committed and who are going to jump right on it can get one. But we don't
Yeah.
really want it kind of, you know, we don't really want to be carrying this like for the season. There are other things though where we definitely do think, okay, we've made enough of this, you know, sort of to last us like a good sort of 6 months. We'll take a look in 3 months, see, you know, how it's performing, and then we can place sort of another order. And then in a week or two, it's, you know, it's gone in everything except XL, as you say, or extra
Yeah.
small. It's a learning process, you know, and the other week when we first launched our first round of masks and they sold out, I mean, they sold out in a matter of seconds.
Mm.
You know, it's not like we made 5 masks. I don't think we made, you know, many thousands of masks, but 500 or something. We
Yeah.
definitely didn't expect that. And we started getting people commenting on our Instagram saying like, you know, basically just yelling at us. And I actually got on the phone with some of these people because they were customers. We had, you know, I had their phone number. So I just rang up some of the more heated people, and you know, and these people would be like, well, you need to get a planner, you need to get a merchandiser. Don't tell me you can't predict, you know, how many of these you're going to sell. I was like, well, I can't. We have about 10
Yeah.
people working in this company. None of them is has the sort of background that you're talking about. They have backgrounds in like sewing things, or they have, you know, they have a background in like graphic design because we need a
Yeah.
graphic designer, you know. And I'm glad that in most cases we're erring on the side of having fewer things. As you say, it's
Absolutely.
part of what's enabled us to be in okay shape in a sort of crisis like this. But it is definitely a learning process. I won't pretend that all of it is intentional. Like, you know, it definitely, it kills me sometimes when I think that we've made enough of something to last us for a few weeks, and clearly we could have sold 10 times the number. It pains me because it's like, okay, well, that's just revenue that we're leaving behind really for no reason. I can't pretend it's all on purpose, but some of it is.
And what are some examples of that, of items that have really surprised you, aside from the masks? You know, I'm sure there's some stuff that you've looked at and gone, that's pretty niche. I can see 5-10 guys out there, you know, buying this, and then it turns out that it's a bit of a hit.
Well, the very first thing that springs to mind is the croquet stripe blazer. The croquet stripe has become kind of our signature stripe. It's a, you know, it's a multicolor stripe. It's not a rainbow, but it's very, very colorful. It's inspired by a lot of rowing clubs that have, you know, a very bright multi-stripe as their club blazer. This actual design was designed by my girlfriend, Microsoft Paint, using the colors that appeared on a vintage croquet stake.
Okay.
And I thought it was great. I thought it was a great color combo, and that it might be really good and really useful for press. As just kind of a neat thing to spice up the other like navy blazers or navy with cream trim that we had on the site. And we made not many of them, although we had to make, you know, well, we had to order a certain amount of fabric because it was woven specifically for us. And I remember thinking like, oh God, we're going to be stuck with these blazers forever, but oh well. And when the site went live, the very first thing that was ordered was one of those blazers, and not from anyone I knew either. And it's just kind of gone from there, and it continues to be 3 years in one of the most popular items that we sell, one of the most popular blazers on our site. And it's something that really initially I thought, okay, like I'm sure Pogi in Tokyo will love this.
Sure.
I'm not sure how many other people are really going to be able to, you know, to see themselves buying it and wearing it regularly. And there have been other things like that as well. The barber jacket that we did that split, it was very simple, but split green and navy, you know, sold out almost immediately. A couple of the things that we've done with Land's End as a collaboration. We came out with a very 90s sort of rugby that's magenta and teal. We came out with a color block sort of squall jacket. Those things sold out immediately as well. I mean, there've been a lot of things. I guess sort of by now the lesson really is like, well, just however many you think you can sell, like order a few more. I haven't really taken that on board, but I'm sure I'll continue to be, you know, to be surprised by how quickly some of these things do disappear.
But you do seem to be describing things that are kind of, I don't want to say they're an investment piece necessarily, but they're something where you buy one of them and then you've got that thing and you continue wearing that for the next 20 years or so, which is great value and sustainable.
Definitely. I mean, I'm definitely part of the school of like, you know, buy less and buy better, buy things that will last. And not just last in terms of like, well, they're well constructed, so they will not be falling apart and have holes in them. In a way, that's actually the less important thing. Some of my favorite things do have holes in them, and I keep wearing them anyway. Although, you know, good quality, good make is very important. But also things that, you know, will stand the test of time and actually be able to be worn a long time from now and not look dated, not look kind of out of fashion. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely sort of how I think about things.
Do you think, you know, which sort of leads me to the question of how do you think our approach to style or fashion is going to be changed, or is it going to be changed by the current situation, by the COVID-19 crisis, and where people have sort of put a stop on their clothing shopping for the moment. People are going to come out of this and just be desperate to shop up a storm, or are they going to, we're going to go into a recession where people are really kind of clinging to every cent that they've got?
Before I answer that, just for Mr. Mort's sake, I see Mordecai on here. What's up, Mordecai? Chirping up in the comments. I just think he would appreciate this vintage Royal Hong Kong Golf Club polo shirt.
Absolutely.
He commented on the turquoise. He loves a good vintage piece. Mordecai, miss you. Say hi to Polly G for me. But to answer your question, I don't love to kind of put myself in a position of kind of, I don't know, trying to predict what's going to happen in the market more broadly. I don't come from this industry. I still consider myself very much a kind of neophyte in this world, if not an interloper in this world. All I can say is, as it affects our business. I mean, I'm definitely counting my lucky stars that we, that we are primarily an e-commerce brand, that we don't have stores all over the place. I personally can't wait to be able to have a store again, to be able to have events in our store again. I would think and I would expect and hope that when the coast is clear, when people are feeling genuinely safe, they will be excited to go shop, to go look at things on a rack, to go look at things in a store, to go shop in person again, because it's something that, no one's really been able to do, at least around here, for a long time. I think the economy has definitely suffered as a result of what's happened here. And I don't claim to be any kind of expert at all. I was a teaching assistant in econ when I was an undergrad, actually.
Sure.
And I think some of my professors harbored great hopes for my future in that world, but it was not meant to be. So
yeah,
I don't like to, kind of opine too much, but it is really scary. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people are going to be put under a huge amount of sort of financial pressure by what's happened. It's really sad. It's really unfortunate. I'm not sure how it's going to affect the industry, more broadly. I think that one trend that I've not been such a fan of in this industry, has been fast fashion. I think, being able to buy things for pennies that have, that have been made in Bangladesh or wherever
absolutely.
is not really kind of like it's not good for the planet. It's not good for other businesses, because it creates a lot of confusion in the marketplace about, well, how much really should a shirt be or whatever. I have no idea how it's going to affect that business, but I'm certainly not a big fan of it. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in the industry more broadly.
I think Mordecai puts it quite succinctly there. And but look, it's true. I don't know of, unless you're Amazon or in the toilet paper and rice and basics business, they're the only ones that seem to be kind of thriving right now. We're all really suffering. So it's yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I would just add is, I feel very fortunate as well with Rowing Blazers that we don't have a huge sort of wholesale presence. I think we kind of very consciously made the decision not to go very wide in wholesale. We were, we've been approached often about going into this store or that store. We do a little bit of wholesale only in places where it really makes sense. We work with a few really, really great stores in Japan. Rowing Blazers is a brand. It's in Beams, United Arrows, B Shop, Biotop, a few really great stores, Maidens in Japan. And there it really makes sense. All of those stores are really great to work with. It's in J Press Oyama. It's in Usonian Goods. A lot of stores in Japan, and they are really great to work with because you know they're not going to screw you over. They're not going to take the product and you'll never see the money. They're going to present the product in a great way alongside brands that it should be alongside. They're not going to do weird sales and mark it down and sort of erode the brand value. Those are really great wholesale accounts to be working with. I consider myself very lucky that we weren't doing wholesale with Barney's or with Neiman Marcus or with some of these other wholesale accounts that, you know, are going out of business. And sadly, I think many of the brands they work with are you know, the product is gone and they're never going to see the money either. And I think the brands that are able to go direct, the brands that are able to go e-commerce first will have a big advantage, even when this thing is all over. I think the brands that, you know, I like to think that even though our brand is at a premium price point, it's not like, I hate sort of fashion with a capital F or luxury with a capital L. It's just not really a world that I live in or kind of understand, to be totally honest. Those are the kinds of brands, though, that rely on Barney's or rely on Neiman Marcus to get this thing in front of the right eyes and to get the whole marketing machine behind it. And I mean, those might not, you know, Barney's doesn't exist anymore. So I do consider ourselves to be fortunate from that perspective too.
Well, and you're only 3 years old, but it must be, you know, I've seen a lot of particularly American labels that get a little bit of hype and a bit of momentum, and then, you know, take on a huge amount of get leveraged up the wazoo basically, and you know, really rapidly expand, and it's you know, you're suddenly in a position where it's sink or swim, right?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely, on the one hand, I'd say there is a sense for sure with Rowing Blazers. It's like, hey, we are on the train and the train has long left the station and it is just moving. So, you know, whatever we're working on, it's kind of like hop aboard because it is going. There's no slowing this thing down. At the same time, you know, I would like to think anyway that we are growing kind of slowly, sustainably, in a smart way. And the goal is not to have several hundred stores, you know, open all over the U.S. The goal is not to be in every Neiman Marcus store all over the place. I mean, the goal is to be in 0 Neiman Marcus stores for the moment anyway. And that's no knock on them. It's just what's right for our business at the moment. So it definitely feels like it's a bit of a whirlwind, you know, for me living in it. But I do think kind of in the grand scheme of things, we are kind of taking things in a more step-by-step, more sustainable growth kind of pace.
Sounds sensible. Yeah. No, everyone is always trying to be the next Ralph Lauren, but I don't know if there's going to be another Ralph, unless it's Kanye. I don't know.
No, I don't think there's going to be another Ralph Lauren. I think those days are gone. And you know, I think also, you know, Ralph is so good at what he does. There's only going to be one anyway. I think we often elicit comparisons to Ralph Lauren, or people come into the store and they say, "Oh, this reminds me of Ralph Lauren rugby." I mean, we often also have been compared in the past to the original Band of Outsiders. I think we definitely have a little bit more of a traditional sort of flavor, but you know, both of those are great compliments. Both of those also are brands that didn't last too long. So, you know, I try to, take all that with a grain of salt. I don't think that, you know, having a behemoth kind of business that has huge wholesale, that has a huge brick and mortar footprint, that has kind of outlet and off price, sales channels. It's one thing if you've sort of, you know, built a business and that's where you've sort of ended up at. It's not necessarily kind of the route that I want to go down. I'm all for keeping this as a relatively small brand, keeping the way we do things, you know, as they are, and keeping it relatively manageable, because as small and manageable as it is, I definitely find myself kind of juggling a lot of different projects. As you can see, we're coming out with a lot of new things all the time. So it's sort of crazy enough as it is right now, without having to push to scale up super rapidly.
Yeah, ambition is great, but yeah, taken to a certain extent. Well, look, I'll let you go shortly, Jack. But the final thing I didn't ask at the beginning. You know, where are you isolating at the moment? Unless that's one of those fancy Zoom backgrounds. It looks it looks all right. It looks okay.
Yeah, it's not a Zoom background. This is real. I'm in Naples, Florida. I came down here. I came down here right at the beginning of March, before this sort of coronavirus crisis was really hitting the U.S. shores in a major way. My dad has just moved into a new place down here. He's had a history of respiratory issues as well. So with that kind of in mind, and that sort of accelerated him moving down here, I guess. But I came down to get him, you know, sort of set up and make sure that he you know, had everything he needed to help move furniture into his new place and so on. And I thought I was going to be down here for 5 days. And yeah, I've ended up being down here for, you know, over 2 months. Well, I guess almost 2.5 months now. It's, yeah, it's very, very strange. And actually at first, you know, after 5 days, getting ready to go back, it was like, oh, things are kind of a little up in the air with New York. Let me stay down here for another week. And then it was like, okay, well, things are really bad. Let me stay here for another week. Oh, wow, things are really, really bad. And then at that point, it was kind of like, well, you know, there's no point flying straight back into the frying pan, because New York very quickly became the global epicenter for the virus. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I feel in some ways very guilty being here. I mean, we still have people working in New York. You know, we're still doing fulfillment in New York. Our head of e-commerce, Caitlin, you know, is in there rolling up her sleeves and helping to fulfill all the e-commerce orders that we've had, because we have been, yeah, we've been doing way more online than we ever have in the past, or than we ever expected to do. But I feel kind of guilty, but at the same time, I think, you know, traveling unless it's absolutely necessary is not really something to be doing right now. And yeah, it's not a bad place to be. I just feel a little bit guilty, if anything.
No, fair enough. But you know, yeah, it does look like a happy problem getting stuck by the beach in Florida, and a lot of people have been misbehaving down there as well, and spending too much time on the beaches. But I would say one of the silver linings to this situation, and I'm on, I don't even know what it is. I think it's like 8 weeks I've spent at home now, but lots of quality time with the family. Perhaps sometimes it feels like too much quality time with the family, but it's a good thing overall.
I can imagine. I can definitely relate to that. Well, yeah. Fingers crossed that things go back to relatively normal relatively soon.
Yeah, and look, once again, you know, and it is why I really wanted to chat with you today. Is you know, kudos for the work that you're doing, because you know, brands like yours must be getting hard hit. You know, and it's tough. You're as you say, you're not a big operation with factories that you can just switch over to making scrubs and masks. So look, it's definitely to be applauded. So well done.
Cheers. Thank you so much. I mean, yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat with me as well. I really appreciate it.
No, it's a real pleasure. Thank you for spending your morning with me, Jack. Much appreciated. And thank you everyone who's watched or who will watch this back on recording.
Thanks for spending your evening with me. Cheers, Christian. Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
Now I can loosen up and pour a stiff drink. So good one.
See you, man.
Good to speak with you, Jack. Take care. Bye now.